Hello, 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 and welcome to the AAA Hole Podcast for this week. I know it is a little late being posted this week, and I wanted to go over a few things, but I'm not feeling my best right now, and this podcast is going to be a little bit shorter, so I'm just going to say that right up top. I am recording it offline, so it's not going to be done publicly, and I just wanted to touch on, I wasn't going to do a podcast at all this week, but because of how bad I feel, but there is a topic that I figure I can cover real quick. So you guys get a podcast, and I can't really find another place to slot this topic, and where it would be a community discussion. So it's a topic you guys have seen pop up multiple times, especially here recently, with EA announcing a single-player Star Wars game after killing the one we all wanted, and killing the studio that was making it, and telling us single-player games are dead and they weren't profitable. And why is everybody flip-flopping on this so much? Why are single-player games dead, and then they're not dead? And then you've probably seen the YouTube videos from others trying to figure this out, and saying that they're being murdered, or, you know, they're not dying, they're being murdered, or they're being suppressed, or whatever. In all honesty, I'm going to just look at it from a business standpoint and try to figure out why single-player games don't seem to work as well in the AAA gaming market now as they did in the past. Like how the market itself has changed and why it's changed. It's not going to be much of a rant. Excuse me. It's not going to be much of a rant this time because, again, I don't feel my best. But I'm just going to try to figure this out. So all games were single-player games way back when. And we're going to kind of go over the history of gaming and how this has changed. So all games were single-player games until the birth of the internet, for the most part. I mean, you had your Mario parties, you had your Mario Kart, your Street Fighters, your couch co-op games. But for the most part, RPGs thrived. Final Fantasy was born out of this era. You know, you had your long-form platformer games like Mario that, you know, were... Yeah, it had a two-player mode, but you basically took turns. One player played at a time. So a lot of games were just focused on being single-player games, and they worked. Some of them became franchises. Some of them were one-offs, and then your company would make another game and another game. But that's what I feel the main difference is between single-player games and these live service, these multiplayer games that we've all been focused on here, that the industry is trying to shift towards, is the way a single-player game has to work is they do the narrative. They make their long-form single-player game their, 10, 15-hour experience, and then they have to immediately start working on the sequel. Or I guess in today's world, maybe some DLC, and then the sequel. Or do both at once. You know, you can maybe stretch out the longevity of a single-player or story-driven game with some DLC. Borderlands 2 famously did this for a while. You know, just kept the game going until they could release a pre-sequel and then, move on to the next game. I think, some RPGs have done that. So DLC is probably going to be thrown in there. But for the most part, it's make a game, finish a game, immediately start working on the next game, so that you can continue to make profit off of it. Because after the game is sold and after people beat it, they tend to be done with it. Now, the downside to this from a business standpoint is that it can be costly. It is much cheaper for a AAA company to make that base game experience, like a Destiny, for instance, to make that big budget base game experience and then work on smaller chunks of content to keep throwing at that game and keep it going indefinitely. And, Destiny's done this for quite a while. The same thing with some of your MMOs doing this. It's much cheaper to make that form of game where you just make your base game, you make your foundation, and then you just keep continuing to build upon it and keep people invested in it. It's cheaper from a business standpoint to do that. That requires less development time, that requires less resources. Because you can just build smaller chunks upon that foundation instead of having to build a sequel every time, like you're Uncharted, and then immediately building an Uncharted 2, and then immediately building an Uncharted 3, and then an Uncharted 4. Because the only way to keep that business model sustainable, like we've seen with God of War, or Uncharted, or Last of Us, those kinds of games, the only way to keep that sustainable is to keep the franchise going Marvel MCU style. and just keep making new thing after new thing after new thing that's completely different from the original thing, that requires a lot of overhead. A lot of development time, a lot of work. And when you're losing sales on that because of services like Redbox and places like GameStop, where you can just buy the game used, wait for it to go on sale, buy it used, and then they lose money. They have no, what's the new term that they love using nowadays? They have no, quote unquote, recurrent user spending. People just wait and then buy it cheaper. So how do you combat that? And they've tried to combat that over the years. They'd throw in an arbitrary, they tried for a while to throw in an arbitrary multiplayer mode to every single game. And then putting an online pass associated with that mode. So if you wanted to play the game online, you had to buy either the game new. If you bought it new, it came with an online pass, but that online pass was one-time use. So if you bought the game used or you were renting it, you then had to pay $5, $10, whatever it was, to get online access to that game forever. So it was a one-time fee. It didn't roll over so well, and they kind of stopped doing that. So then you saw the rise of the season pass and day one DLC, the big day one mega patch, as it were, where you bought the game, used from GameStop, or you rented it from Redbox, and then as soon as you got it home, you had to wait and download this big patch. And then the day one DLC incentivized you, if you were renting it from Redbox, it incentivized you to buy the game, because if you blew through the game in a day or two, you blew through the story and you were done with it, well, now there was more. And you wanted to play that more, So they encouraged you to buy the season pass, and they tried bundling them together, and they tried doing everything to combat these, and they were somewhat successful for a while. The rise of digital media as opposed to physical media, which has gotten to the point where it's threatening to kill GameStop's business, which is good. I don't think that there should exist a point where you can't do used games. I just don't think the way GameStop did used games was particularly fair to the developers, the publishers. And while I could care less if GameStop cuts into the profits of, a company like EA or Activision, who obviously have just buttloads of money on top of buttloads of money, and they use it to, shut down studios and strong arm the industry. Now, yeah, fuck those guys. I get that. And, if GameStop could sock it to them one way or another, then, more power to them. But the problem is when you start those little wars like that, other studios and companies get frequently caught in the crossfire. And then those are the studios that end up hurting. And those are the ones that end up getting bought by EA or bought by Activision and then shut down later, like your Visceral games. Those companies that used to make those story-driven single-player experiences and made a name for themselves doing that. And, a lot of factors go into them being bought out by EA or by the bigger companies. But, yeah, GameStop's used game sales were a big part of it. They were a big thing for a while. And I'm glad to see that GameStop's going to have to either learn a lesson and change their business model or die. But what does that mean for the... Sorry about that. I had to mute the microphone for a second. Sneezing. I'm not feeling my best here. So what does that mean for the gaming industry as a whole then? What does that mean for the AAA industry if everything goes completely digital and you get away from the threat of used games, from the threat of Redbox, from the threat of Craigslist or Amazon? Then where does that leave you? Where does that leave us? If GameStop goes away, as much as so many people hate GameStop, if it goes away completely, it goes out of business. If Redstop, if physical media just becomes a thing of the past, and you're seeing less and less physical games being produced. A lot of games are releasing digital only, especially indie games. They can't afford to make a physical copy. It's expensive. It's expensive. That manufacturing cost is expensive. Where it's just paying a one-time fee and having your game thrown up on a digital service is easier. I mean, Xbox is already testing the water with full-fledged consoles that are being released without a disc drive. Digital-only consoles. Can they work? And I say, yeah. Yeah, they can. I think they can. I don't know if they'll work right now, but we're definitely going in that direction. The NVIDIA Shield TV is an Android gaming console that's done rather well for itself. Despite not having a physical media or, trying to compete in the main gaming market, it's doing okay. It's hung in there. And it has a pretty large user base to be a digital-only Android-based gaming console. That only hooks up to your TV. It's an Android device without a screen. I mean, I have an NVIDIA Shield tablet sitting on my floor in here that I went with instead of the TV model that I hate that they quit making, because the NVIDIA Shield tablet has an HDMI port on it. So I can just plug it up like a console. It has a console mode and a controller where it turns the screen off on the tablet and just becomes a console. But it was a Switch before there was a Switch. It was where Nintendo got the idea for the Switch. Which, speaking of Nintendo, they're the ones making single-player games work right now. So anytime this argument comes up that single-player games are dead or they're dying and that multiplayer games are better, that they're the thing of the future, these live service games, that's the direction everyone's going. Everyone always points to Nintendo. Nintendo is making it work for several reasons from a business standpoint. One, they're doing that thing you need to be doing to make your single-player games work. There can't be years upon years upon years between releases of your single-player games. Now, there may be years upon years between releases of a Zelda game or one game in a Nintendo franchise. But as far as Nintendo games going, single-player games just being released on a Nintendo console, they'll do 5 or 6 a year, more even. They're constantly pumping these things out. So they're getting their sales from the sales of the games. And those games are selling systems. You have to have a Switch to play these things. And having a big system and something to sell for is a major factor there. Because it seems like the only real good single-player games we get nowadays are the ones that are system sellers. That are focused on selling a system, not selling a game. Like God of War, for instance. Sony made a stellar single-player experience right there. God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, those are stellar single-player experiences only found on one console. And Sony didn't make that game to make profit off the game. They made the game to sell their units, to sell their systems, to sell their hardware. Now, it happened to be a really good game, and it had to be in order to sell hardware. But Nintendo takes it to the next level. They make a business out of pumping out these single-player games that are stellar first-party experiences while also still selling the consoles. Sony, doesn't do that. They release one every now and then. Nintendo's doing several a year. Which is why their franchises are so beloved and so well-known, because they keep going. They're like the Walking Dead. They just won't fucking die. Because there's always a new Mario game around the corner, There's always a new Nintendo game around the corner, whether it be a Mario game or a Zelda game or a Metroid game or a Kirby game or a Donkey Kong game or something. There's always something from Nintendo. And then you look into the realm of live service, and when was the last time you saw a new Bungie game? They threw all their eggs in the Destiny basket. How often do you see Blizzard games? I mean, even before their acquisition from Activision, they learned the power of the live service when they struck gold with World of Warcraft. And they put all their development time into that, into keeping a live service going. And that's all they do is pump out live services now. They're a company of live services. So that is the great way to contrast live services versus single-player experiences and what the main differences is between the two. If you want a company that is focused on nothing but live services, their entire library is a live service, Blizzard is it. Every single one of their games is a live service at this point in their library. You know, StarCraft, they treat like a live service. It gets regular updates. World of Warcraft, of course. You know, Overwatch, Diablo 3. They're all live services. And then you flip that coin to the other side and have a look at Nintendo, who is focused on these single-player, offline-driven games. Because Nintendo famously doesn't know how the internet works, so they focus on these offline games. And their library is vastly bigger. Look at the difference in size between those two libraries. And tell me which one you think takes more development time to maintain. Blizzard, with its handful of games that it just needs to constantly update and maintain, or Nintendo, with its ever-growing library of new release after new release after new release. Yeah, we'll put some DLC out here and there for some of these games to keep them going, but for the most part, they're one and done. Now, Breath of the Wild is not a live service game. It got a couple pieces of DLC, but it's done. You know, Mario vs. Rabbids Kingdom Battle, one and done. You know, even the new Metroids. You know, the one on 3DS, one and done. One and done, baby. We're working on the next one now. Your Mario Party, one and done. Working on the next one now. You know, your Mario Kart, one and done. Working on the next one now. We might re-release it or port it over to a new system, but doesn't stay alive with DLC forever. The closest thing they have to a live service is Splatoon 2 and Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers got the season pass and went the DLC route. They knew their audience there. And it's good. It's good. The fighting games work well for that. But they don't do that with every game. They don't do that often. And they did the DLC right when they did that. No pre-order bonuses. No day one DLC bullcrap. I feel like it really was extra content there. And they even gave you one piece of it for free if you just bought the game within the first 2 months. Not pre-order, just buy it within the first 2 months. They even gave you the option to wait for reviews of the game, to wait for player feedback, to wait and watch some live streams and see if you'd like it before you bought it, and then still gave you something for free for being an early adopter. That's the kind of bonuses we need to be focusing on. Early adopter bonuses, not this pre-order nonsense. Don't take my money without giving me a product and make me wait and strong arm me. That's mafia level shit. You should be rewarding me for getting in line, to buy it on day one, knowing I could have waited for the same price or waited for a sale. Do that. Incentivize people to buy the game at full price instead of waiting for a sale. Instead of taking their money before you release a product and then a shitstorm hits them like fucking Anthem, a shitty live service game that was rushed out of development that you pushed so hard. That is a swindler's trick. That is a red flag in any other industry. To be asked to pay for a product before you have a chance to even see what it looks like. Before you have a chance to physically touch it. Before it's finished. To pay for a promise in any other industry would be considered a con man's red flag. That's the shit Trump University did. Sold you a promise. Trump stakes. Literally everything Trump puts his name on comes with that promise. Even his presidency. I'm not trying to turn this political, but it's the best example I can think of right now. That is a red flag, to pay for something based on nothing but someone's word who only wants your money. So that's the traveling, 1920s traveling, hey, get your miracle cure here. The traveling medicine salesman trick. Nintendo took the exact opposite approach there. They'll have my respect, despite the stuff that Nintendo does wrong and how much they irritate me with their hardware bullcrap. Their incessant need to throw gimmick after gimmick down our throat instead of just giving us the games we want. I don't want to construct shit out of cardboard to play a game, man. Just give me a game. I don't want to flail my arms about like a goddamn idiot. unless I'm playing something in VR. Stop with the motion controller bullcrap. This is gimmick after gimmick with their hardware, but their software is a fucking prime example of why single-player games aren't dead, and we all know it. But I'm trying to break down from a business standpoint why we see less of them. Because we all know they're not dead. And they're never going to die. Because if the AAA market completely moves away from single-player games, you're going to see a rise of indie single-player games in the indie market. And there's going to be more indie success stories. That's all they're going to do is create more indie success stories that way. So their argument that single-player games just aren't dead, that are dead and are unwanted by the player base anymore, that argument's not going to hold water. But I think people misunderstand what they're saying. When they say single-player games are dead, when they say, specifically what they say, companies like EA say, is single-player games aren't profitable anymore. That's a difference. That's not dead. It's just not profitable. So I tried to look at this from a business standpoint, and it's kind of their fault, kind of not. I mean, they're right and they're wrong. So when you get a game like, like a big name game like your Spider-Man single player experience, or your Uncharted or, something like this, a game that's massive in scope, takes a lot of money to make, and you're hiring, you're hiring famous voice actors, hiring expensive voice actors, you're making this grand, really expensive game. Well, some of that's your fault. I think the budget on some of these games is inflated to a point of being unrealistic. So no, it's not going to be profitable for you. You're not going to earn that money back when you're Call of Duty hiring fucking Kevin Costner to do voiceover work. Yeah, a good portion of your game's budget went to Kevin Costner. Why are you doing this? Why are you hiring celebrities when they're good voice actors you can get for cheaper who could get the job done just as well? These guys aren't voice actors, they're celebrities. So when you do things like that, when you're just trying to make the game as big and, as big and extravagant as possible, then yes, your budget's going to go through the roof for that game. And then you'll have games that come along that show you that you can make billions on a shoestring budget like Minecraft. That there's so many indie games, single player driven games that have just knocked it out of the park, become phenomenons, like Five Nights at Freddy's, without that large overhead budget. Stardew Valley was made by one dude. So when people see stuff like that, and then they hear the excuse that they're not profitable, they call bullshit. And rightfully so, they should. They should call bullshit. You should. Because they're part of that bullshit. They're creating that big tab, that big budget that they have to come back and, they have to come back and make profit off of. So they have to make back what they spent plus more. And when what you spent is so high, from a business standpoint, what you've spent is so high, then yes, you get burned on a single player game. And then you go, well, we didn't make money off that one, but we're still making money off Destiny. So some guy in a suit sits up in an office, puts 2 and 2 together and says, well, then let's just not do single player games anymore if they're going to cost us money. They don't ever factor in all the other parts of it that make that budget what it is. It's the same mistake Hollywood's made over and over again. Deadpool. The original Deadpool movie was done on a budget, small budget in comparison to every other superhero movie ever made. And it made more money than all of them. So, bigger budget doesn't mean bigger returns. And that's something I feel the AAA gaming industry doesn't understand. Just like Hollywood is taking forever to learn that, doesn't understand. The way to make single-player games works is smaller budgets, better experiences. Focus on just making the game good. Not big, not flashy, not filled with celebrities, but just make a good game, a good story, a good narrative, a good gameplay experience. And then, after you make that game and it sells, find out how to make it an ongoing thing. You know, if it was an unexpected success, if it was way more successful than you originally thought it would be, so you hadn't planned for a sequel, but now you have to, because, wow, the demand is there, then start pumping out some small DLC to keep people playing that original game, to just basically just shovel some coal onto the hype train to keep it moving along just a little bit longer. Put a small team on DLC and everybody else start working on the sequel. That's what Borderlands did with Borderlands 2 into the pre-sequel. You know, they had a small team just pumping out that Borderlands 2 DLC and it was all awesome. It was good content, kept people coming back, kept the game fresh in people's mind until, boom, announcement of the pre-sequel. And they didn't do that in between the pre-sequel and the third one, and that has everybody worried about Borderlands 3, and honestly I am too. Borderlands 3 is the kind of game that's ripe for, for microtransactions, that's ripe for being a live service candidate. You know, I am scared that Borderlands may become a Destiny-like live service game. You know, Destiny copied Borderlands and its loot system, and they borrowed a lot from Borderlands when they were making Destiny. And now I feel I feel Borderlands might return the favor and borrow a lot from Destiny in making its third game. That it may go the live service route. I hope I'm wrong. I'm hoping it stays a story-driven experience with a definitive beginning, middle, and end. And that, yeah, I do hope they do a little bit to add some replayability, because that was my problem with the original Borderlands games, was there wasn't much replayability there beyond the DLC and just playing a different class and doing the game again. I hope they add some other stuff, some in-game kind of stuff that after you beat the game, you can still go back and talk to NPCs, and maybe they have in-game quests, or, there's, some hidden things you can go find and reasons to go back and re-explore the land. Maybe the landscape changes after the end of the game, and then you have something new to explore and do. And you can just do a bunch of little side quests, just stuff to explore, rewards for the loot. Maybe some characters who speak of a legendary gun that they knew existed, that some legendary vault hunter used, and if they could find it again, you'd get something special. So then it gives you a reason to keep grinding for loot, because you find that one piece of loot, you take it back to that NPC, you get something special. I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas here. There's a number of ways that you could do things to keep people playing single-player experiences. That's another thing that they need to learn to do. I feel that's where God of War dropped the ball. There's no replayability in some of these single-player games. So in order to successfully bring single-player games back, for them to be profitable, AAA industry, if you're listening, in order for them to be profitable, they need to check a different set of boxes than these live service games you've been pumping out. Yes, they need to be good. They need to be somewhat lengthy. They need to provide a good story-driven experience with good gameplay and good story. Now, that doesn't mean expensive graphics. That doesn't mean expensive voice actors. It just needs to be good. It needs to work. If you're making a horror game, don't hire a fucking comedian to do your voice acting. It doesn't fit. Whatever voice actor you get needs to fit the environment just to make the game good. The graphics need to fit the atmosphere, not a certain budget. Then you need to add some form of replayability to the game. And that doesn't mean multiplayer. Don't immediately go shoehorning multiplayer into games that don't need it. What I mean by add replayability, Nintendo figured this out way back when on the original NES. The original Zelda had the Master Quest. You beat the game, and Nintendo started the idea of the New Game Plus. Play it a second time, things will be different. Items got rearranged. It's something as simple as that. Rearrange item, mission locations. Maybe make some alternate quests that require you to play through a second time to experience. Find some quests with branching trees that say, well, if I do it this way, I get this. If I do it this way, I get that. And then people have an incentive to play through a second time on that new game plus and try the path a different way than they did the first time to see what the difference is. There's some replayability there. Yes, you can still have your DLC and your season pass if it's good. Don't just start shoehorning this stuff in to make money and make profit and pump it out as quickly as possible. Take your time and pump out good DLC. If you need an example of where to go, look at Borderlands 2. It did it right. That game was still putting out DLC 2 years after the release of the game. And it wasn't a live service. Imagine still making money off of a single-player game. Yes, I'm aware it has co-op, but it was built as a single-player game. But imagine making money off of a non-live service game, off of an offline game. 2 years after the release of that game. EA, Activision, AAA market, I'm looking at you. Imagine that. You can still have that. But you have to keep the content coming. And I don't mean just DLC content. I mean, they're episodes of a TV show. No, that doesn't mean make it episodic. Jesus Christ. Don't cherry pick my words here. What I mean by episodes, think of each actual game as a whole season of a television show. You want to get the next season, right? No one watched season 1 of The Walking Dead and said, well, guess that show's done. That was good. I have no interest in watching this show ever again. No one still watched season 1 of Breaking Bad and goes, oh, so that's how he became Heisenberg. Cool. And then never watched another episode. No, we wanted every single season. So think of each game as a season. Uncharted 1 was season 1. Uncharted 2 was season 2. And the individual chapters in that game were the episodes. That's how you should think about it. Put your episodes within the game. Don't make the game episodic. And make each game a season. And as soon as that season's done and you see how profitable it is, you immediately start working on the next season. And yeah, you can throw some DLC in there in the meantime to keep players tide them over and to keep them playing, to keep them, spoon feed them a little bit. See, the problem with your live service games is you expect players to just play that one game. And that's not a sustainable business model. That's why the live service is going to die before single-player games will die, because people will get sick of that. They already are. Right now, I have like 4 live service games that I want to play with my friends, and I got to find a way to juggle just 4 games. And you guys keep pumping out new stuff you want me to buy? But I'm still supposed to give all my attention to Destiny 2? I'm still supposed to give all my attention, to Overwatch or Diablo 3 or still supposed to give all my attention to Anthem, or I'm still supposed to give all my attention to, Elder Scrolls Online or an MMO if I choose to play one of those. Dear Jesus Christ. So many live services. That's a not sustainable business model because of the fact that there's a finite number of players, man. And if you're all fighting for them with live services and you're expecting these players to commit to one game, well, then every player is going to find their game. And then there'll be no more customers left to sell to. You guys are running a pyramid scheme here. Eventually, you run out of people to recruit. It's not sustainable. But single-player games are. You can create a fan for life in the same way movies have. Star Wars movies will always make money, even if they're shitty. You know that because you're desperately clinging to that license. Why? Because that's what they did. They built a fan base. They didn't create one, movie that people are supposed to watch forever. They've created more and more and more. And that's what you should be doing. You should be making these single-player experiences that create more and more and more. You can still have your live service game, but pick one. Stick with one live service game. And maybe do your live service games in ways that are profitable, but don't require so much fucking attention. So we can split our attention among both. There's a balance you guys have to learn how to strike here. I think Destiny does okay with that. I can do the weekly stuff for Destiny in a day or two. And then occasionally log in once a week to do raids. So make it so I'm doing that. So I'm only having to log. So I don't have to play this game 24/7 in order to feel like I'm making progress in it. I feel like I'm making progress in Destiny by playing it once or twice a week. And that gives me the rest of the week to play other games. To give my attention to something else you guys are making that wants my money. You know, but when there's so much to do in so many games, like the grind in Anthem was ridiculous. Got rid of that. Fallout 76 required so much fucking time to make any progress. Stop playing that. If it requires too much time, I can't do it. I already have a full-time job. I can't fucking play my games like they're a job. That's why the Switch is so popular. Because it has focused on these bite-sized, smaller experiences. And yeah, they're meant to be played on the go. But maybe that's been its saving grace. Maybe that's the gaming market's saving grace. Is they focused on smaller experiences because they made the system portable, but those same experiences work when not portable. I mean, look at the polls. Most people who own a Switch play it as a home console and don't really play it in portable mode that often. The majority of the user base just plays it at home, occasionally taking it with them on a trip or to a doctor's office or something, but most of the time they play at home. Which means these same experiences that Nintendo's making in smaller doses, these portable experiences they're making, could be very profitable at home. Be very profitable in a home-based PC or console experience. I mean, they're knocking it out of the park with single-player game after single-player game, man. They can't all be system sellers. Now, once you buy the system, then the next game you bought wasn't a system seller. It wasn't the reason you bought the system, but it was a nice bonus. And Nintendo's making money hand over fist on those bonuses. They may suck ass at online, but they're proving to the rest of the industry that offline's not dead in the process. And if you guys can strike that balance between the two to make these experiences that are good online and off, and learn how to pump them out, you can get way more profit off that than you can off of a live service. Live services are doomed to eventually die, especially as more and more of them enter the market. But these single-player experiences, they build franchises. They build fan bases. They make money for decades to come when done right. No live service ever will. With the exception of World of Warcraft, no live service ever will or ever has. You're lucky to get 5 years out of one. But a Mario, a Zelda, a Metroid, those span decades. The key is learning how to budget your game so it's profitable and you're not overspending your budget making the game, because as soon as you finish making it, you need to start making the sequel. But you don't want to oversaturate. You need several different IPs, like Nintendo has, to spread this shit out. You can't put out a new Mario game every fucking year. You can't put out a new Zelda game every fucking year. Some of them are going to be bad if you do that. Just like people get tired of it. It becomes stale. That's what happened with Call of Duty. You put one out every fucking year, people are like, God damn, another one? And then they become live services? You want me to buy another one? But Nintendo spaces them out. This year you may get a new Zelda game, but next year it may be a new Metroid game. And next year it may be, a new Mario game. Next year it may be a new Kirby. It may be a new Donkey Kong. It may be another new Metroid. It may be a crossover. Maybe it's another Mario Kart. They have so many different individual franchises that they don't need to give you a new one of each every year. A spin-off game here and there, something to keep you playing, but Metroid took a break for years. And they finally made another one and sold like hotcakes. Zelda doesn't need a new game every year. Sometimes they skip a year. They take breaks. The point is to make the game good. Do not release it until it's finished. Do not put it on an arbitrary time frame. Do not sell this game until you are done with it, until it is the experience your developers envisioned. And my last point, that brings me to my last point, to make single-player games good again, to make them profitable for you, put trust in your developers. They have a vision. Let them achieve that vision. Give them the time they need to achieve the vision. Don't start promising release dates before you know that you're within, grasp of one. You don't release the game's release date until the game is in its beta phase, until you're testing the game as a finished product. Don't do that. But give them the freedom to make the game that they want to make. You put a time frame, you put a fucking time limit on them. You put a time crunch there, and you end up with unfinished games getting released. These buggy, broken Fallout 76 type messes. Instead of just taking your time, making the product good, and then bringing it out. Trust me, gamers have plenty to play in the meantime. They're not going to forget about it. Take your time. Make it good. It's what Nintendo does. If it takes 7 years in between one Metroid game to the next for them to go back to the drawing board and figure it out, Nintendo is famous for almost finishing a game completely and then not liking the product they made and scrapping it and starting over from scratch. Canceling a release date and saying, yeah, we didn't like what we made. It wasn't good enough. So we're starting over. People get a little mad at first, but when the game finally does come out, it's worth it. Every gamer knows that. It's worth it, and it will sell millions upon billions. And it'll make an assload of money. And you keep the faith of your player base to know that they'll be back for the next one. You come up with different IPs, that it gives you the ability to do that. You don't need an Assassin's Creed every year. Come up with several different IPs. So your Assassin's Creed team can take 2 or 3 years between games to really focus on and make the next one good. And in that 2 or 3 years in the meantime, where do you get your money from then? Well, your other IPs. Maybe this year we get an Assassin's Creed. Next year we get a Call of Duty. The year after that, we get a Destiny. We get an Anthem, and then we go back to the Assassin's Creed because it's been a few years since the last one of those. Do that. Make money off franchises. Make money off hard work. Make money off talented developers. Don't make money off gimmicks, get-rich-quick schemes, and whale hunting. And you all know what I mean when I say whale hunting. I get you're greedy, AAA gaming industry. I get you fat cats up there are greedy and you want as much money as you can as fast as you can. We all do. We'd all want that. That's why we play the lottery down here at the low part of the totem pole. Us poor people have to play the lottery to feel like we might get rich quick. We don't have the money to invest in stuff. But there's a way you can have both. You can keep your players happy. You can avoid the bad PR. You can avoid all the other bullshit. And you can still have your live service games. You can still give players the stuff that they want. And you can still do it on budgets that, make you profit. There's a way we can all win. But it requires you to stop being predatory to your customers and start trying to win them back. Focus on making them happy, and they'll make your pockets happy. Don't think of them as commodities. Think of them as assets. You need them. You need them. And they need a better gaming experience. So let's make this a win-win, guys. So that's going to be my podcast for this week, everybody. I don't know if anybody in the gaming industry will ever hear this or listen to it, but, maybe. And I'm sorry this podcast is short and kind of rambly and didn't really have a direct focus. Again, my wife's been in the hospital all week. I've gotten very little sleep now. I don't feel good. She's out of the hospital. She's fine now. It was routine stuff, but a blood transfusion takes a while. It was a lot of prep work, and she has to get several of those a year. So this has been a rough week for me. And I really didn't have time to sit down and write anything, so I'm just off the cuff with this one. So hope you guys like it. Show up for some live streams, say hey, check in on the wife, see how we're doing, and we can discuss topics for next week and actually do a deep dive into something. Actually make a community discussion out of it. But for this week, hey, this is what you got. So thanks for listening. Thanks for taking me with you on your morning run, your commute to work, which I know this is a little late going out because I kind of overslept this morning, but thanks for being patient with me, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching the stream. Thanks for making me part of your life. I may only do this for fun, but you guys are the part that makes it fun. So I'll take a page from my own book. I've told the gaming industry to keep your players happy. They'll keep you happy. Hey, I'm trying to keep you listeners happy, trying to keep you viewers happy so I can keep doing this. It's maybe a hobby for me, but you guys are the reason I do that hobby. You're the part that makes it fun. So, if there's some feedback you want to give, some suggestions you have, or you want to be part of it, let me know. Shoot me an email, deathwitch@gmail.com, or follow me on Twitter @deathwitch, and let's make this something great. Let's hang out together. Let's make gaming great again. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you witches next week.